This guy is
has always been one of the major sports, and that still remains the case today. Television viewing figures and earnings for, say, the World Heavyweight Championship really outweigh any other single event in sport. What has changed over the years is that the interest in what we used to call small ball boxing or club boxing, without a doubt, has diminished. It's more and more difficult for promoters to run small shows, and I think we can ascribe to that probably two factors. One is the changing nature of society. 20, 30 years ago, a lot of men would have boxed in their youth at some stage, but that's no longer the case. And secondly, most boxing nowadays is shown on satellite television, which has a restricted viewing audience, and consequently there are many sections of the country that never get to see boxing casually, and it's that much harder for the new talent coming up to make a national name for themselves.
Where you gonna run to, baby? Now where you gonna hide? Where you gonna rest your head when there's nowhere else inside? Where you gonna run to, baby? Now where you gonna hide? When they're coming after you, you better get your pockets right.
What's up, man? Yeah, had some problems last night.
Significant evenings I've ever had was at the London Arena in February of 1995 when Nigel Benn and Gerald McLennan boxed, and I believe that the performance of Nigel Benn that night was perhaps the greatest single performance, greatest single test of character I've ever seen in my life, and that would have been one of the great fights of British boxing had it not been for the awful and terrible aftermath, and to some extent that fight has been buried. But up until the morning after the fight, quite right it should have been buried as well, but up until the morning after the fight, I have to say that was one of the great fights I've ever seen.
When they're coming after you, you better get your pockets right.
Without competing over 3 rounds, 6 rounds, 10 rounds or 12 rounds, that's just the training side of things. So yeah, I've no doubt that boxing's got to rate with one of the top physical sports in the world. I can't say it's the top because you can't say that unless you've tried the other ones. Everyone's got their own ideas. But I think it'd be common knowledge that boxing is a tough sport. That's why there isn't many participating boxers, amateur or pro. You know, I mean, potentially there's millions and millions that watch boxing. Big time boxing on telly gets watched by millions. But participation-wise, it's only a handful, really. When you consider football gets watched by millions, but there's also millions that participate on an amateur basis every weekend, every week. Boxing, that's not the case.
Where you gonna run to, baby? Now where you gonna hide? Where you gonna rest your head when there's nowhere else inside?